The morning sun spilled over the manicured lawns of Willow Grove, a suburban enclave where every mailbox gleamed and every hedge was trimmed to a ruler's edge. I'd been in my new home less than a week, still unpacking boxes, when I stepped onto my porch with a steaming mug of coffee. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. From my vantage point, I could see the row of charming bungalows stretching down the block homes I quietly owned, all 15 of them, bought at a foreclosure auction after the previous management company went belly up. To the neighbors, I was just Tom Harper, a 50-something guy in khakis settling into retirement. But to myself, I was the landlord of Willow Grove, biding my time. That's when I saw her, Margaret Ellis, the self-appointed queen of the Willow Grove Homeowners Association. She strode across the street, clipboard in hand, her smile as stiff as a department store mannequin's. Her graying hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her eyes scanned my porch like a hawk spotting a field mouse. I'd heard whispers about her, how she ruled the HOA with an iron fist, fining people for unapproved flower pots or slightly askew shutters. But I wasn't prepared for her opening salvo. "Excuse me," she called, her voice sharp but laced with false sweetness. "Tenants aren't allowed porch furniture without HOA approval." I froze mid-sip. "Tenants? I own this house," I said, keeping my tone even. Margaret scoffed, as if I'd claimed I was the mayor. "Owners get packets. You didn't submit your welcome checklist." Her clipboard seemed to pulse with authority, like a scepter she'd forged herself. "I'll look into that," I replied, sipping my coffee. "No need to tip my hand yet." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We've had issues with renters thinking they own the place. Keep the furniture minimal. No lawn decorations. The HOA board is strict." I nodded, biting back a grin. Margaret was the HOA boarder, at least she thought she was. Her laminated badge and neatly typed Google Docs were her crown and throne. She marched off, satisfied, while I watched her go, already plotting my next move. Over the next few days, Margaret's campaign began. Notes appeared on my door, written in aggressive cursive, lawn edging 1.5 inches over limit. Correct immediately. A fake fine arrived for leaving my trash cans visible, though they were locked behind a fence. One Sunday at 6:45 a.m., she knocked to inform me that my coffee mug black, not beige, violated the HOA's approved color scheme. Beige mugs. It was absurd, but the neighbors were too scared to fight back. They whispered about her reign of terror. A $50 fine for a Halloween pumpkin lingering past November, a citation for a pool float deemed tasteless. Margaret held court every Tuesday on Zoom, muting dissenters and preaching about community cohesion with PowerPoint slides that looked like floral wallpaper. I stayed quiet, letting her dig her own grave. But the real spark came when I waved at a neighbor, and Margaret shouted across the cul-de-sac, "That's not your yard, tenant. Stay on your side." The audacity was almost funny because she didn't know I owned not just my house, but the one across the street, the one next door, and the rentals around the block. 15 properties, all mine. I decided to play along, curious to see how far she'd go. Would she fine me for breathing too loudly? Demand I submit my rose bushes for inspection? The longer she paraded her power, the sweeter it would be when I pulled the curtain back. It started with 2 Adirondack chairs on my lawn, simple, gray, inoffensive. To Margaret, they were a declaration of war. A laminated notice appeared, taped to one chair like a scarlet letter: unauthorized seating. Class 2 violation. Second offense will result in escalation. Class 2? What was Class 1 smiling too broadly? That afternoon, she emailed the entire HOA list, CCing everyone, titled Chronic Noncompliance. Lot 12, tenant occupied. She wrote, "Problematic renter may require landlord intervention." I wanted to reply, "You mean me?" but I held back. The chairs stayed. The next morning, they were gone. A note, tucked in a plastic sleeve under a decorative rock, read, "Chairs removed for community safety. Retrieved from HOA impound." Impound? I found her in her garage, clipboard in hand, squinting at me like I was a stray dog. "We don't usually return items to non-owners," she said. "But I'll make an exception if you sign a furniture behavior contract." "A contract?" I asked, barely hiding my amusement. "Like, promising they'll behave. No bouncing, no lounging, no drinks on armrests," she snapped. "This is a community, not a frat house." She handed me a printed agreement requiring my initials on 8 lines, including one that read, "I shall not host guests using non-HOA approved seating." It was so ridiculous I considered framing it. I signed, retrieved the chairs, and placed them an inch behind my property line with a tiny sign, "Rehabilitated." Margaret didn't laugh. Instead, she planted a neon orange cone beside them, labeled "Temporary Seating Zone, Pending Inspection." Neighbors started noticing. One whispered, "She tried to find me for wind chimes." Another said Margaret once measured a doormat and declared it 2 inches too wide. People were fed up, but no one dared confront her. She documented everything: photos, timestamps, even a neighbor's Facebook post about a barbecue, filed as a noise foresight violation. I leaned into my role as the problem tenant, asking polite questions during her weekly walk and watch rounds. "Can I wave at squirrels?" I'd ask. "Only with regulated motions," she'd reply, dead serious. I started recording every encounter, saving emails, photographing notes. She thought she was building a case against me. I was building a dossier on her delusion. And she had no idea the tenant she was targeting owned her neighbor's house, the one behind her, and the entire block. Her next move would be her boldest and her biggest mistake. Margaret's reign over Willow Grove was a masterclass in suburban tyranny, but I, Tom Harper, was no ordinary foe. As the secret owner of 15 properties, I'd been playing the long game, letting her pile up her own rope. My recordings, emails, and photograph notes were stacking up like kindling, and I could feel the spark coming. Margaret, oblivious, was about to light the match herself. Her next escalation came during the Tuesday HOA Zoom meeting, which she'd grandly renamed the Community Harmony Assembly. She enforced a dress code: business casual, no hats, muted backgrounds, and monitored screens like a digital warden. I joined in a navy hoodie with a virtual mountain backdrop, just to nudge her. Halfway through a debate about approved mailbox colors, she pounced. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the call like a knife. "We have a tenant on the line. This meeting is for owners only." She stressed owners like it was a royal title. I received the notice as a resident. I replied, feigning innocence. "Tenants don't get votes or a voice," she snapped, her lips pursing as if she'd bitten a lemon. "Kindly exit, or I'll report this to your landlord." I muted myself to stifle a laugh and typed in the chat, "I'll have the owner contact you directly." Margaret smirked, thinking she'd won, and moved on. But this wasn't just any meeting. It was the annual ownership roll call and voting session, legally required to include all property owners for budget approvals and board elections. The stage was set. When Margaret reached the roll call, she read from her sacred spreadsheet, her eyes glinting with control. "Lot 12, tenant occupied. No response expected." "Actually," I said, unmuting, "I'm here to vote for Lot 12. And lots 11, 13, and 14 through 23. Silence. Margaret blinked, her face frozen like a deer in headlights. "I'm sorry. I own Lot 12, I said calmly. "And the rest of the block. I can send the deed portfolio, but the county registrar has it on file." The pause was so heavy it could have crushed a picnic table. One neighbor's video showed him covering his mouth. Another typed, "Wait, what?" in the chat. Margaret's voice dropped, the way it does when someone realizes they've insulted the wrong person. "That must be a mistake. We haven't updated the ownership logs. I submitted the change forms 2 months ago," I replied. "You marked me as a tenant anyway." She flipped through her binder, pages rustling like a storm. "Even so," she stammered, "you haven't attended compliance reviews or owner workshops." "Because you told me I wasn't allowed," I said. The irony landed like a sledgehammer. The other board members squirmed. The treasurer, George Miller, cleared his throat. "If Mr. Margaret froze, her Zoom square a portrait of panic. "That's not how this works. It's 1 vote per person." "Actually," another board member said, "it's 1 vote per unit, unless the bylaws changed." They hadn't. I checked, filed under my property manager's email when I bought the block. Margaret's pixelated face couldn't hide the dread pooling in her eyes. She'd spent weeks issuing fake fines, condescending at every turn, and trying to banish someone who now outranked her. "Well," she said, voice cracking, "I moved to table this meeting for procedural review." "Denied," I said smoothly. "As majority owner, I vote to proceed." The screen erupted with murmurs and chat messages. Margaret's grip on her digital kingdom was slipping. I pushed further. I also motioned for a vote of no confidence in current leadership. George's eyes lit up. Seconded. Margaret fumbled. This is chaos. It's insubordination. It's democracy, someone said. Then the unthinkable happened. Margaret was muted. Her own mute all policy turned against her. She typed furiously in the chat. This is illegal. I am the HOA president. But I'd already shared my screen, displaying my deeds, company name, and ownership filings. Every violation she'd stacked against a renter was now a weapon in my hands. Her screen went black. She'd logged off. By the end of the call, a new vote was scheduled to decide Margaret's fate as HOA president. For the first time, every neighbor RSVP'd. Margaret vanished for 2 days, her red SUV absent from its usual double-parked spot. But on the third morning, it was back, sprawled across 2 spaces like a territorial flag. She wasn't done. I caught her near the mailbox cluster, pretending to clean the HOA bulletin board with a rag while eyeing my mail slot. I brushed it off until I found my mailbox ajar. An envelope from my real estate attorney opened and taped shut with glittery tape. Inside was a draft cease and desist listing Margaret's harassment. She'd left a sticky note. Is he the landlord? Fraud. The irony was delicious. She committed a federal offense to prove I was lying, when I wasn't. That evening, I confronted her as she measured a neighbor's patio lights with a laser level. Hey, Margaret, I said, holding the letter and her note in an evidence bag. You left this in my mail. Her face drained of color. I what? You opened a letter from my lawyer. Federal offense, by the way. She stammered. It was an accident mixed up with my tape. Glitter tape? I asked. Or the part where you wrote, landlord fraud? Her mouth opened, but all that came out was a squeak. Don't worry, I said. I'm not pressing charges yet. But I have to file a tampering notice for insurance. You understand liability, right? Her knuckles whitened around her clipboard. This is harassment. You're harassing me. Margaret, I said, lowering my voice. You opened my mail. That's a felony. You read your own name in it. That's karma. Her eyes twitched. Next week's vote already has 17 confirmed ballots. That's a quorum. She spun and power walked to her house, slamming the door. Word spread fast. A neighbor posted on the community Facebook group, "Is it true Margaret opened someone's mail?" Another replied with a police siren gif, "Felony Friday." By sunset, the thread had dozens of comments. One of my rental properties housed the group's moderator, who amplified the post. An anonymous email tipped me off. She's planning a petition to block your ownership. Claims your name isn't on the titles. I sent a link to the county registrar, where my name was clear on all 15 deeds. Margaret was chasing ghosts, and her paper trail was turning against her. The following Monday, she hand-delivered a certified letter, dressed in a windbreaker embroidered with HOA compliance liaison. You've been documented, she said smugly, for non-cooperation and disrupting community order. The complaint was 12 pages, single-spaced, with color-coded appendices and forged board signatures. It accused me of defying visual harmony standards, using unverified planters, and me favor possessing an unpermitted decorative bird. My concrete owl, perched by a rosebush, had apparently offended the HOA's approved fauna themes. She even claimed I was committing real estate fraud by posing as both tenant and owner. Margaret didn't just want control. She believed I was orchestrating a conspiracy. I shared the letter on the Facebook group. Anyone else get a 12-page novel from Margaret? The comments exploded. She fined me for 2 optimistic solar lights. She cited my mulch as off-brand. Neighbors compared citations, and a pattern emerged. One, Susan, noted she measured my shutters and said they were 3 millimeters off. Another asked, has anyone checked her house? I had a drone. I'd never used it for spying, but documenting Margaret's property felt justified. The footage was a goldmine, an illegal pergola of untreated wood, a neon teal shed, 5 flamingos HOA limit, 2, and a satellite dish on a prohibited fence. Best of all, an inflatable Santa Claus still up in March. I submitted a 6-page counter-complaint with 10 color photos, labeled Exhibit A through J. The board went silent. George called me later. That satellite dish. We fined someone $300 for the same thing. She's got to pay now, right? Oh, you bet, I said. The next HOA meeting was a slaughter. Margaret argued her flamingos were therapeutic decor and Santa was a year-round joy symbol. A neighbor asked, "Then why's he holding a 25 Days of Christmas banner?" Her face turned redder than any HOA-approved pallet. The board issued her 6 violations, totaling $1,000. I offered to lend her a compliant bird statue. She didn't respond. The neighborhood buzzed. Someone made shirts. Visual harmony violator. Another renamed their Wi-Fi Margaret's Flamingo Jail. The rulebook she worshipped had turned on her, and the HOA queen was tasting her own medicine. The air in Willow Grove crackled with a new energy. Margaret Ellis, once the unchallenged HOA dictator, was unraveling, and the neighborhood was alive with whispers and laughter. I, Tom Harper, the secret owner of 15 properties, had turned her own playbook against her. Her violations, flamingos, neon sheds, and an outlaw Santa were now public, and her $1,000 in fines stung like a slap. But Margaret wasn't the type to slink away. She was cornered, and a cornered queen fights dirty. Her next move came via a late-night email from an old HOA address. Subject line: Urgent, Emergency HOA Mandate Activation. The message was pure Margaret Red font, for highlight colors, and a header image of an eagle on a mailbox. It read, "In accordance with Section 17.4 of the Willow Grove Emergency Bylaws, the Board is enacting temporary governance protocols to prevent irreversible damage to community integrity." For 8 paragraphs, she railed against hostile actors, me, and froze all owner votes and property improvements. She signed it, Margaret Ellis, Acting President and Emergency Compliance Officer. There were problems. First, Section 17.4 hadn't been invoked since a 2006 sewer crisis involving a raccoon invasion. Second, it required unanimous board approval, which she didn't have. Third, and most gloriously, the clause stipulated that any officer invoking it without a quorum would forfeit their position immediately. In her haste to lock me out, Margaret had fired herself. George Miller, the treasurer, called an emergency meeting. "Did she just override herself?" he asked, chuckling. "I think she impeached herself by typo," another board member said. "We checked the records. No board vote, no quorum." Clause 17.4 was a trapdoor, and Margaret had fallen through. We sent a formal notice via registered mail, keeping it professional. She didn't respond, but 2 days later, a new email arrived from margaret.ellis.reform@gmail.com, titled Constitutional Crisis, HOA Under Siege. She claimed the board was hijacked by outside influences and called me a land baron with dangerous decorative habits. She proposed martial aesthetic law to save the community. I printed it and taped it to my fridge. The neighbors weren't amused. They wanted stability, not subpoenas for their rosebushes. The HOA's legal counsel confirmed Margaret's self-impeachment, and a formal announcement went out. Margaret Ellis is no longer a board officer or voting member. Neighbors laughed so hard some cried. One walked his dog with a sign, "Emergency protocols activated by Margaret." Another posted, "This property protected by Clause 17.4. Margaret crashed the next HOA meeting, wearing a sun hat and demanding reinstatement via sovereign principle. George, grinning, held up her own email. "You cited 17.4, Margaret. It removed you." "You tricked me," she shouted. "You wrote it," I said. "I just read it." The room erupted. The vote to confirm her removal passed 19-0, with one abstention, her husband, Carl. Margaret shuffled out, her clipboard gone, her eagle banner a fading memory. Her reign had collapsed under her own fine print. But Margaret wasn't done. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, Emergency HOA Restoration Initiative, featuring her photo like a campaign ad. "Help me save Willow Grove from corporate takeover." She claimed to be a whistleblower exposing backdoor land acquisitions and a lawn mafia led by me. The flyers linked to willowtruth.info, a manifesto with blurry screenshots, and a GoFundMe. Restore the real HOA. The payment portal didn't go to a neutral account, but to WG Community Renewal LLC, registered to Margaret Ellis. I dug deeper. The flyer's QR code, labeled Pay HOA Fines Online, led to the same LLC. Then it hit me. My Al Fines payment slip had gone there too. Margaret had been diverting HOA funds for months, bypassing the official treasurer. I called George. "You need to see this." The board's accountant paled. "That's not our account." The paper trail revealed $9,200 in community donations, $3,000 for landscaping adjustments, and a $400 charge for an HOA retreat leadership weekend. She'd booked a spa with HOA money. At the next emergency meeting, we laid out the evidence, printouts, transactions, corporate filings. The HOA lawyer, Ellen Brooks, didn't mince words. This is embezzlement. Unregistered financial activity under false pretenses. Margaret crashed the Zoom as Concerned Citizen 02, but we knew it was her. This is a smear campaign, she shrieked. That account was for alternative funding. The HOA didn't meet my standards, so I created my own. You impersonated an official fund, Ellen said. That's fraud, Margaret. The board voted unanimously to turn the matter over to county investigators. 2 days later, Margaret got a subpoena. Then a bombshell. A former treasurer anonymously revealed that 4 years ago, Margaret had tried to set up an auxiliary deposit channel for fines. He'd refused, but she'd done it anyway. This wasn't new, it had been simmering beneath her lawn clippings for years. The GoFundMe vanished, the website went offline, and her LLC was registered to her own address, now flagged for 7 HOA violations and under investigation for fraud. Her house, once a fortress of power, was drowning in legal notices. Margaret went quiet, but not for long. A week later, my real estate brokerage's receptionist, Linda, called, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Guess who wants to list her house? Clipboard Margaret, big sunglasses, fake name. Margaret had walked in as Marjorie E., requesting discreet representation to sell 114 Willow Grove. She checked the Do Not Disclose to HOA box, claiming the issues were cosmetic misunderstandings with rogue voters. Linda played along, offering coffee and collecting paperwork. When asked about the principal broker, Linda said, Tom Harper. You've probably seen him around. Margaret's face collapsed. He owns this agency? He founded it, Linda said. We handle most of Willow Grove's inventory, including your neighbors. Margaret stood, knocking over her purse, keys, flyers, a mini tape measure spilling out. I'll reassess, she muttered. Is there a back exit? Only the front door, Linda said, smiling. Margaret tried again, calling anonymously. I need an agent who avoids neighborhood politics, she said. Linda forwarded the call to me. This is Tom, I said cheerfully. The silence was golden. This is a mistake, she sputtered. A private matter. If you're listing a house under investigation, I said, I'll disclose all violations and HOA history in the seller's packet. She hung up, but she'd already signed a pre-listing form. I filed it with a note. Client withdrew after discovering conflict with broker, her legal adversary. The office group chat went wild, one agent posting a meme of Margaret's face on a deal with it gif. More importantly, we had proof she was trying to flee while hiding financial misconduct. I passed it to the HOA legal team, adding it to her case. Margaret had called the one person she couldn't bully, and I locked the door with her own pin. The final twist came via an anonymous email, Willow Files, a zip folder labeled Margaret_Ellis_correspondence_2019-2024. I scanned it for viruses, then opened it. 300 emails, organized in folders like Board Influence Strategy and Operation Law and Lockdown. Margaret's signature was on every one, her digital fingerprints undeniable. They revealed a years-long scheme. She'd stacked the board with friends, relatives, and fake homeowners through temporary deed trusts. One member was a cousin in Arizona who'd never visited. Another was a high school pal paid in Amazon gift cards. The HOA wasn't elected, it was engineered. In a thread called Fall Election Prep, she wrote, place 2 candidates under pseudonyms. No one questions low turnout. She'd anticipated resistance. If challenged, claim renters corrupted the system. Frame outsider as land baron. That outsider was me. Even my Al fine was part of a compliance shock strategy to overwhelm neighbors with citations until she was the only voice left. I forwarded the files to George and Ellen. Their reaction was electric. George called an emergency vote to purge the board and issue a statement. Margaret Ellis's leadership was rooted in deception and noncompliance. All decisions since 2020 are under audit. The emails were posted on the HOA website under the truth about Willow Grove leadership. Margaret didn't deny them, she couldn't. The community's response was spectacular. Yard signs appeared, vote for actual humans. A neighbor hosted a puppet board retirement party with marionettes of Margaret and her cronies. A TikTok account dramatized her emails, one about my lawn chair coup, racking up 800,000 views. Margaret's open letter, typed in Comic Sans, claimed the emails were satire. No one bought it. The HOA attorney confirmed their admissibility, triggering a 5-year audit of funds, elections, and complaints. Margaret's puppet board was dismantled. Some members didn't even know they were on it. One thought he'd signed up for a gym membership. Her greatest weapon, her paper trail, had become her noose, and she'd archived every knot herself. The Willow Grove saga had reached a fever pitch. Margaret Ellis, once the undisputed HOA tyrant, was now a pariah, her schemes exposed by the Willow Files email leak. Tom Harper, owner of 15 properties, had turned her own weapons paper trails, bylaws, and hubris against her. Her accidental self-impeachment via Clause 17.4 and the discovery of her embezzlement through a fake LLC had left her reeling. The neighborhood was no longer cowed, it was energized, united by a shared enemy. But Margaret wasn't done. She was plotting a final stand, and it would be her most audacious yet. Less than 2 weeks after the email leak, the HOA filed a 47-page lawsuit against Margaret. The charges were a litany of suburban crimes, misappropriation of funds, falsified board votes, shadow bank accounts, and obstruction of owner rights. Ellen Brooks, the HOA's sharp-tongued lawyer, laid it out. We're seeking full restitution, civil penalties, and a permanent ban on MS. Ellis holding any governance role in any HOA statewide. When Margaret was served, neighbors reported hearing her scream so loudly the process server flinched. True to form, she fired back with a press release, BCC'd to 36 homeowners, calling the lawsuit a stunt by radical lawn anarchists. She hired a discount attorney, Ron Baxter, whose website boasted, "We fight for your freedom and your fence line." It was a red flag, but Margaret's defense hinged on denial. Her filings claimed she'd acted in good faith as an ad hoc enforcer of community spirit and that her LLC's funds were discretionary goodwill donations. Then came the blunder. To prove transparency, her team submitted scanned spreadsheets except they weren't redacted. The documents revealed 5 additional payments to her fake HOA account after her removal, one dated 2 days before her impeachment. Names, addresses, and Margaret's notes were exposed. Fine padded. He parked like a jerk. Uncompliant lawn, but might be a lawyer. Proceed carefully. The court clerk reportedly laughed so hard she needed a break. Ellen, in the pretrial conference, held up the spreadsheet. The defendant has submitted her own confession in Excel. Ron Baxter argued the documents were out of context, but the judge cut him off. Context doesn't change $signs, Mr. Baxter. The court ordered an independent audit of Margaret's LLC, uncovering $18,000 in undocumented transactions over 36 months, spa trips, boutique stationery, a $280 bill from VictorianLawn.com, and a $78 invoice for a golden clipboard, engraved leadership version. Margaret claimed the clipboard was a symbol of office. The bylaws begged to differ. The judge ruled for a full civil trial, with potential damages triple the embezzled amount. Margaret's defense had widened the target on her back. The neighborhood celebrated. Someone posted an AI-voiced reading of the spreadsheet with dramatic piano music. Another hosted a legal spreadsheet wine night, where they played HOA-themed trivia. What's the penalty for finding a non-compliant poodle? Answer: 3 months of court fees and public humiliation. Margaret's mailbox overflowed with legal notices, her flamingos were confiscated, and her clipboard was bagged as evidence. She stopped appearing in public, her porch light dimming like her fading relevance. But the court wasn't done. An asset seizure order landed at Margaret's door. She tried to reject it, claiming the court lacked jurisdiction over her moral property, but the sheriff's deputy taped the notice to her bronze mailbox and left. The list was long: bank accounts, electronics, luxury items bought with HOA funds, and the HOA's original storage shed, which Margaret had relocated to her backyard years ago for safekeeping. She'd padlocked it, strung it with LED fairy lights, and posted a sign, HOA Presidential Archives, authorized access only. Neighbors assumed it held old paint cans and spite. When the recovery team arrived with a locksmith, the street turned into a carnival. Inside the shed were 17 plastic bins labeled Margaret's files, for clipboards with resident behavior profiles, a mini printer for violation notices, and a mannequin wearing a sash, Madam President. She built a lair, a neighbor whispered. Like a Bond villain obsessed with landscaping. The team cataloged everything. The lead officer said, all HOA items, tools, equipment returned to the board. Personal decor is potential restitution. Margaret charged out in pajama pants and a blazer, shouting, you can't take that. It's my creative space. Funded by HOA dues, the officer replied. You billed the HOA $1,400 for its relocation and presidential customization. That was infrastructure, she screamed. The sash was ceremonial. George, nearby, couldn't resist. Ceremonial fraud. The crowd chuckled. Margaret lunged for a bin, but an officer blocked her. Step back, ma'am. This is court authorized. You can't steal my shed, she whispered, trembling. It's HOA history. Which is why, I said, stepping forward, it's going in the community center, next to a sign, recovered property from the Great Ellis regime. Margaret's face crumpled. Over 2 hours, the shed was dismantled, each plank loaded onto the HOA's truck. Neighbors filmed, one live streaming under Margaret's throne room evicted. Comments poured in, better than Netflix. She should have fled when the owl appeared. In the final bin, they found Margaret's emergency binder, filled with unsigned violation notices. One, half complete, targeted me, standing on grass with intent to resist. I framed it. The shed wasn't just her fortress, it was her altar to control. Now it was community property again, along with everything she'd stolen. By week's end, her driveway was empty, her backyard barren, her title of Madam President a punchline in the neighborhood's history. Margaret went silent, dodging court dates and ignoring the HOA's collections officer. We thought she'd skip town until she resurfaced on Channel 8's Morning Talk, a daytime show mixing gossip and home improvement tips. My phone buzzed with texts. Turn on TV. Margaret's spilling tea. There she was, stiff on a couch, cheering reading, bullied by my HOA. One woman's fight against tyranny. I nearly choked on my coffee. The host leaned in. Margaret, how did this start? It began, she said, voice grave, when a tenant, posing as a resident, manipulated the neighborhood with deceptive property tactics and weaponized lawn decor. Weaponized. The audience tittered. He had an owl, she hissed. With glasses. People mocked me, she continued, filing fake fines, stealing my shed, dressing gnomes defiantly. The co-host giggled. So, you were removed as president and sued by your HOA? It was a coup. Margaret snapped. A land coup. She waved a manila folder. These are my plans for mailbox uniformity, 5-year vision. The host nodded. And you were accused of fraud? Unjustly, she said. Why shouldn't the HOA pay for premium flamingo sculptures? The studio roared with laughter. The host held up a T-shirt. I survived Margaret's reign of lawn terror. You mean this? The crowd lost it. Margaret's face turned beet red. This is defamation. They weaponized their grass. We reached out to your former HOA president, now majority owner, the host said. A screen lit up with me, sipping tea from an owl-shaped mug. Hi, Margaret, I said. Thanks for inspiring our community to care again. The fastest way to unify a neighborhood is to give them a common enemy. The audience howled. Margaret froze, hands clenched, as if swallowing a screen. The host asked, What now, Margaret? I'm writing a book, she croaked. When civility dies, the tenant takeover. The clip hit YouTube, racking up 2 million views in 3 days. Meme accounts, real estate blogs, and satire shows reposted it. Margaret became the face of HOA nightmares, her name synonymous with petty tyranny. Back in Willow Grove, we named the reclaimed shed the Margaret Containment Center and hosted spring barbecues beside it. The owl got a golden pedestal. The bylaws added a clause, no board member may serve if they've weaponized lawn decor for personal gain. Margaret's final act was a restraining order against me, filed a week after her TV debacle. She cited harassment, psychological intimidation, and visual provocation via yard decor. My owl had made it to court. The documents listed grievances, smiled during mailbox pickup, hosted barbecue while smirking. My lawyer and I arrived at the hearing, half amused, half concerned. Margaret showed up with a binder thick enough for a murder trial, dressed in a blazer and pearls, like a scorned monarch. He's created an environment of disrespect, she told the judge. I can't walk past his home without feeling attacked by ornamental hostility. The judge, a weary woman who'd seen it all, skimmed the paperwork. Mr. Harper, your name is on 15 Willow Grove deeds. Yes, Your Honor. I'm the registered owner. Margaret cut in. That's what he says, but I haven't seen those records. The judge raised an eyebrow. Odd, because I approved 6 of those transfers myself during title resolution season. Mr. Harper is a municipal stakeholder in that zip code. Margaret's jaw dropped. You know him? I know his name, the judge said. I signed zoning easements for his parcels. Ms. Ellis, if you're walking in Willow Grove, you're likely on his property. Margaret sputtered. He makes faces. He's sarcastic. He puts up birds. Ceramic birds, the judge repeated. My lawyer coughed to hide a laugh. The judge sighed. You're asking me to issue a restraint based on ceramic art and registered ownership? Ms. Ellis, you filed yourself into a corner. The courtroom snickered. Denied. And if this continues, I'll consider sanctions for frivolous filings. Margaret stormed out. The transcript leaked to the neighborhood group chat, then read it. Ornamental hostility became a meme. Neighbors put up gnomes labeled Exhibits AZ. Someone made a sign. Warning, this property may cause emotional turmoil. I found a bobblehead owl dressed as a postman on my porch on anonymous gift. The HOA's insurance provider opened an investigation into Margaret's harassment, citing potential risk escalation. She faced personal liability, and her newsletter, The Truth About Property Power Plays, went unread. Margaret hadn't just lost and Corched lost the public. Margaret Ellis's empire had crumbled, her name now a byword for HOA infamy in Willow Grove. The leaked Willow files, her self-impeachment via Clause 17.4, the embezzlement scandal, and her humiliating TV appearance had stripped her of power. Tom Harper, the unassuming owner of 15 properties, had orchestrated her downfall not with confrontation but with patience, evidence, and her own missteps. The neighborhood, once paralyzed by her rule, was now a chorus of laughter and defiance. But Margaret's story wasn't over. She had one last card to play, and it would cement her legacy as a cautionary tale. The civil trial loomed, with the HOA seeking triple damages for Margaret's $18,000 in embezzled funds. Her golden clipboard, spa trips, and flamingo sculptures were exhibits in a case that read like a suburban thriller. Ellen Brooks, the HOA's lawyer, was relentless, presenting spreadsheets, emails, and the infamous shed contents 17 bins of behavior profiles and a mannequin in a Madam President sash. Margaret's attorney, Ron Baxter, floundered, his good faith defense drowned by her own unredacted notes, fine-padded. He parked like a jerk. The judge's ruling was merciless. Margaret was liable for $54,000 in restitution, plus $10,000 in penalties, and banned from any HOA role statewide. She left the courtroom in silence, her blazer askew, her binder abandoned on the table. Willow Grove didn't just cheer, they threw a party. The Margaret Containment Center, the reclaimed shed, became the centerpiece of a community barbecue. Neighbors grilled burgers, kids bounced in a rented castle, and someone rigged a speaker to play a loop of Margaret's TV clip. He had an owl with glasses. The concrete owl, now on a golden pedestal, was dubbed the Sentinel of Sanity. A new bylaw, no board member may weaponize lawn decor, was framed and hung in the community center, next to my framed violation notice, standing on grass with intent to resist. Margaret's house, once the nerve center of her regime, stood empty. She tried to sell it through my brokerage, only to flee when she learned I owned the agency. After the trial, she listed it with a shady out-of-town firm, but the seller's disclosure required by law listed her violations, fines, and the ongoing fraud investigation. The house sat unsold, its teal shed dismantled, its flamingos long gone. One night, a moving truck appeared, and by dawn, Margaret and her husband, Carl, were gone. She'd transferred the deed to an LLC, WG Renewal Unlimited, but the county flagged it for back taxes. Her escape was as sloppy as her reign. The final twist came months later, when a local reporter uncovered Margaret's book, self-published on a vanity press. When civility dies, the tenant takeover. It was 200 pages of conspiracies, blaming me as a land baron and Willow Grove as a nest of lawn anarchists. She claimed her flamingos were symbols of hope, and her shed a bastion of order. The book sold 12 copies, mostly to curious neighbors who read it for laughs. A review on Amazon summed it up: less a memoir, more a meltdown in Comic Sans. The TikTok account that dramatized her emails pivoted to reading book excerpts, one clip hitting 1 million views. The owl mocked me with its spectacles. Willow Grove transformed. The HOA, under new leadership, prioritized transparency. George Miller, now president, hosted open forums, and bylaws were simplified to prevent another Margaret. The community center buzzed with book clubs, yoga classes, and kids' art shows. Neighbors who'd once feared fines now waved freely, their lawns dotted with unpermitted gnomes and wind chimes. The Facebook group, once a battleground, became a hub for recipes and dog-walking tips. Someone renamed their Wi-Fi "Our Lives Rent-Free," a nod to Margaret's downfall. I kept my role as majority owner quiet, managing my properties through my brokerage. The neighbors didn't need to know I'd bankrolled the barbecue or donated the bounce house. My victory wasn't in gloating, it was in watching Willow Grove breathe again. But the story didn't stay local. The Morning Talk clip went viral, spawning podcasts, Reddit threads, and a real estate blog series. How to Survive Your HOA Tyrant. Margaret's name became shorthand for petty power trips, her flamingos a meme for overreach. At a national HOA conference, a speaker cited Willow Grove as a case study in community resilience, showing my owl mug clip to a laughing crowd. Margaret's punishment wasn't jail or bankruptcy, it was irrelevance. She'd craved control, to be feared and revered, but instead, she was a punchline. When someone in town mentioned that lady with the fines, the reply was always, "Oh, you mean Margaret?" Her legacy wasn't leadership, but a warning. Power built on fear and fraud collapses under scrutiny. She'd written her own epitaph, one spreadsheet, one email, one flamingo at a time. As for me, I stayed in my bungalow, sipping coffee on my Adirondack chairs. The owl still guarded my rose bush, its glasses glinting in the sun. Every spring, I'd join the barbecue, raising a glass to the Margaret Containment Center. The neighbors didn't know I owned half the block, and that was fine. I wasn't here to rule, I was here to live, and to ensure no one else would clip Willow Grove's wings again. The saga left me reflecting on power and justice. Margaret's bullying wasn't just about lawn sit, it was about control, about silencing voices to prop up her ego. But she underestimated the community's strength and mine. Her injustice woke us up, proving that even the smallest acts, saving an email, flying a drone, or keeping a cool head, can topple a tyrant. Willow Grove wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a testament to what happens when people stand together against abuse. Thank you for joining the wild ride of Willow Grove's battle against Margaret Ellis. Her story is more than a suburban feud, it's a mirror to the bullying and injustice we see in everyday life, from overzealous bosses to petty gatekeepers. Have you ever faced a Margaret in your own world? How did you handle it? Should communities fight back with legal action, public shaming, or quiet resistance? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, take a stand, share your perspective, and let's spark a debate about standing up to power and reclaiming justice. Your voice matters, and we can't wait to hear it.